Hi everyone, this video is to continue after you have set up your Photoshop workspace. You have your toolbar over here, you have your layers palette, history palette, properties and adjustments, and you have your image open and ready to go. So the next step we're going to do is start editing this file. This file shows up in your layers palette as a background that has a lock on it and it has a little eyeball next to it so you can turn off visibility for it, etc., etc. We are going to make a copy of our background first and foremost. Every single time we edit a photo, we're going to make a copy. So you guys can right click your background layer and say duplicate layer. It's going to say background copy, da 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 da, hit OK. Now we have two layers. We have the background and we have the background copy. The background copy is what we're going to be making all of our adjustments to in order to maintain the integrity of the file. Okay. The next thing I'm going to have you guys do is crop the image if you need to crop it. So in your toolbar, you have a few things. You have a move tool, you have a rectangular marquee tool, lasso tool, quick selection tool, and a crop tool right here. It looks like two little L's meeting each other. So make sure the crop tool is selected and click on your photo and you should get this like rule of thirds grid over it. So you guys are welcome to crop this however you would like. And you can change the size of it if you want to. However, if you want to maintain the integrity of the original file, you need to set your crop to a specific ratio. So in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, you have like an options bar right here. You can set it to be original ratio, which means I'm going to maintain that rectangle no matter like where I put my little crossbars there. I can set it to be an 8x10, a 4x6. I can set my own size in these two boxes right here, inch-wise. For sake of just this being a practice, why don't we all just set it to original ratio and maintain that ratio of a rectangle, and you guys can crop these. So think about composition. Do we want to see the center of the CD right here? Do we want to see what's going on down here? Do we want to see this droplet off to the side? So I could crop in a little bit further if I didn't want to see all of that. I could leave it as is, crop in a little bit. Once you're done cropping, notice in the layers palette, it changed my layer to say crop preview. It won't let you do anything else in Photoshop until you've hit return on your keyboard to save the crop. All right, so I'm going to hit return on my keyboard. I'm going to save the crop. It gets rid of crop preview. I'm done. So the next thing I'm going to do is start making layers for my photo. And to do that, we're just going to start with really basic editing in Photoshop. We're going to do a brightness adjustment and a contrast adjustment, okay? So down in your layers palette, there are all these like little icons down here. A trash can to delete layers. This is to create a new layer. This is to create a group of layers. This is to create a new fill or adjustment layer, which we're going to be using a lot. And this is to add a layer mask, and these are add layer styles and effects. Okay, so you can click on this little like black and white cookie looking thing down here, and that's going to create adjustment layers since we're going to be adjusting these photos. So I'm on my background copy, I'm going to make an adjustment layer of a brightness and contrast layer. I like to make two of these. Brightness and contrast are in the same layer. I like to do them separately. You guys can either do this or you can work with them together. It's totally up to you, but I'm going to show you the way that I like to do it. Brightness contrast. So my brightness contrast 1, notice in my properties palette it's showing me some areas in which I have a slide bar that I can adjust my brightness and contrast. So I'm going to make sure I'm on one of these layers, brightness, and the photo is a little dark to me, so I can brighten it up a little bit. That's obviously way too much and that's way too dark. So here's where I kind of started. I'm going to brighten it up maybe to about 10 or so. This is why I like to have separate layers. I can take that eyeball and turn it off the layer and turn on the layer just to see how the difference is, right? It's a little bit brighter. I'm going to click on my other layer. I'm going to increase the contrast. Remember, contrast, this will dull it out and this will make it very, 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 very specific as far as darks and lights go. That's, I think, a little bit too much. It's a little too extreme. So here's where I was, but I'm going to add a decent amount of contrast to this photo, maybe around like 40 points or so. And this is me turning it on, turning it off, on, off. I can also rename these layers if I wanted to so that I can tell like what I'm exactly doing to them. So if you click on these, you can just call this, I can call this contrast, and I can call this one brightness. So you have to make sure it's selected, and then there we go. You guys may or may not get used to that. Again, it's another step that's not insanely important, so if you'd like to, you can. So here's my contrast, here's my brightness, here's my photo with both of them turned off, all right? So I've bumped up the brightness a little bit, bumped up the contrast a little bit. So for these particular photos, we're going to be editing for color. So we're going to add another adjustment layer called the color balance layer. There's many different layers for doing different things, but this is what we're going to do for this particular project. So add a color balance layer. Notice it's called Color Balance 1. And over here in Properties, it gives me all these slides for creating an increase in different colors that already exist in the photo. So I could increase the cyan and make this look a little bit more blue. I could increase the red and make this look a little bit more warm. I can increase the magenta, I can increase the green. So it really depends on what you are looking for. Obviously, these are not realistic photos to begin with, so if you want to get pretty funky with it, you can. I tend to go for the warmer side of things, so I'm going to do more magenta and more red, maybe a little bit more like yellow for mine. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. The last thing we're going to do is a curves layer. Contrast, brightness, and curves are going to be required for all photos you turn in Photoshop. We will edit for color and we will edit for black and white often. So this is for color, but the curves layer works for both. And curves is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 options down in your drop-down menu. So I'm going to add one more layer into curves layer. It can be kind of confusing. Curves can do some really cool and funky stuff, but to do something really subtle to this image that's really going to make these shapes pop out, if you take and do what's called an S curve, so I'm going to drop an anchor here on this bar, and I'm going to push that up a little bit to increase some brightness. I'm going to drop an anchor in the middle, push that down a little bit to decrease some of the grays in the photo, and then I'm going to drop one more anchor down here and push that up a little bit, or down, however you want to do it, to increase the contrast. All right, and from there, we are going to turn off the eyeball on and off and just see what that looks like. So let me turn this on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. Notice that I've created a lot more contrast in the colors and in the dark areas and the light areas of my photo. All right, so curves is something you guys can play around with a little bit, but the S curve, this kind of shape right here, is what you're looking for mostly in curves. It basically is a map of all the light and dark areas of your photo, which can seem kind of confusing. But if you look down here, it's black down here, white over here, black down here. And so this is all the dark areas, this is all the gray areas, and this is all the light areas. So you can see there's more darker areas in the photo than there are of light areas in the photo. So what I like to do last is turn off my layers. This is my original photo. Increase the brightness a little bit, increase the contrast a little bit, or I'm sorry, increase the contrast a little bit, changed my color a little bit, and then added some curves to create some contrast. All right, so the last thing we're going to do is save this. We don't want to X out of this because this file right now has your name on it, but it's saved as a JPEG. We want to save it as a Photoshop document. So we're going to go up to File, go to Save As. It's already called your last name, Photoshop, Desktop, Photoshop, all right? We want to make sure the format is set to Photoshop and not JPEG to begin with, all right? So save it as a Photoshop document. Right now I'm just putting it on my desktop. Hit OK when it says that. Okay. Lastly, we're going to save it one more time as a JPEG, all right? So Google Drive and Photoshop do not like each other, so you need to save each file you ever create as a Photoshop file and then as a JPEG file. So I'm going to go down to JPEG, make sure it's saved as an all-readable kind of file, the extension changed to JPEG, and then hit save. I'm replacing the original document, which is totally fine. So I'm going to hit replace. Okay, hit OK, and I'm good to go. So I'm going to minus out of Photoshop right now so you guys can see my desktop. So here is my Waterdrops PSD. Here is my Waterdrops JPEG, all right? And that's it as your intro to Photoshop. These are 2 attachments that you're going to turn into that intro to Photoshop workspace, okay? Thank you so much, and I'll help you with the rest of it in class.